Okay, so we're continuing our study in Ecclesiastes, which we started last Sunday. We're just taking up one chapter each week, so we'll be in this book for about 12 weeks. We have three left, I think, of these journal Bibles that are just the book of Ecclesiastes, that have on the left side the text of Ecclesiastes, and on the right side blank space for you to write, take notes, draw, whatever helps you kind of make sense of the text there on the left. There's three right there on that chair. If you're interested in getting one, they're $7 a piece. That's just basically the cost. And they're not required, but you can bring them with you during class, write down things that strike you during class, or use them for your own study during the week. So each week I want to encourage you to try to walk out of here with something, with one thing, either an image that you might carry with you this week. Maybe there's an image from the text that emerges for you, or one word or one phrase, like we talked a lot about Hebel last Sunday. Maybe one of the words that we talked about today will stick with you and carry that. An action, maybe you'll sense God inviting you to do something or be something like this week because of what we studied. A prayer, maybe a prayer comes to your mind during our study today, or a question that you want to spend some time answering. So just try to walk out of here today with one of those, not all of those, but with one of them. So we're jumping into chapter 2, which is a chapter devoted to the idea of joy or pleasure. And the author we talked about last week, we call him Solomon, because that's the persona that he takes on. The ESV translates the Hebrew word that's used here as preacher, so we call him preacher. But he indicates that this is a chapter devoted to his testing, his trying to discover what brings joy, what brings pleasure in life. So as just a quick overview of the chapter, he spends some time testing wine. So he's a wine tester. And he has some comments to make about that. He explores what one commentator calls deeds of permanence. That is, things that we might do to make a lasting contribution in the minds of other people as a source of joy. He talks about how comprehensive his search for joy is. Wisdom or knowledge as a way to joy, work or labor as a way to joy. And then he ends the chapter by talking about when all is said and done, here are the things that might bring you joy in the brief days that we had together under the sun. Okay, so that's kind of the flow of the chapter. So let's just start out here by talking about joy. What brings you joy? There are no wrong answers. Rosemary? Enos, what'd you say?
People.
Very good. Rosemary?
I work in a special ed kindergarten class. It is the most joyful setting I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Kids learning in a safe environment. So joyful.
Oh, that's nice. Hand up back here, Art.
Yeah, I don't mean to be oddball, so please just make fun of me. But I like drinking wine. I like drinking wine with others. I like the pleasure of that. I realize, it will be within some level of moderation. But so I just want to put that out there.
Yes, thank you.
Being recorded.
I think that's a good answer. Laconia?
I want to say amen to Art.
Anybody want to vote for beer? Hard liquor? Whiskey, bourbon, vodka.
Well, if you're talking about really good scotch, maybe.
We are clearly not sad. John?
Across my week, I work really hard on all those things. Those on that list that yesterday we were out for a walk and Rosemary pointed out these purple little berries. And just seeing that unexpected gift against the blue sky was about as beautiful as it gets. And that has nothing to do with it. We just had to stumble across it.
Yeah, very nice. I think, Scott.
Well, the last 2 days, Friday and Saturday, I've been taking the girls out sledding. And, you know, there is at a golf course near here. And there is nothing more joyful than seeing all of those people. There were probably 100 people there, most of them kids, most of them having an excellent blast. And it was just, seeing all of that happiness just made me feel joyful.
That's neat. Yeah, it's neat. You say something?
The ocean.
Oh,
The ocean. Bring the kids out of it.
I want to add, because it hasn't been mentioned, music. I rediscovered an old, I mean, it's not terribly old, but from a piece of music from the 70s, a month or so ago. It is a holiday Christmas wrappings. I think I've spoken about it before. But just, you know, I can just kind of drift off into a place of real joy. Listening to some really good, and of course I get to define good, good jazz, good whatever, that's well performed.
Very good.
Alex.
Last one, then we'll come back to this at the end.
Nature always gives us joy, but the thing I specifically want to mention that doing all the exploring that we've been doing, like yesterday we went to Litchfield, and it was beautiful, especially in the snow. So we've had lots of little adventures that have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, very much so. Okay, so we're gonna come back to this question, especially when we get to verses 24 through 26, and one of the conclusions that he reaches about joy. So there'll be additional opportunities here. Okay, so the introduction, verses 1 and 2, I said, in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure, enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? So he's testing, I will test you. He's engaged in an exploration, a discernment process to try to discover a pleasure that has gain or profit. Remember last week we looked at this idea of gain or profit, and he's looking for something that has some lasting consequence in his life. And so he's starting this out now with pleasure. The word is simha, means joy or jubilation or laughter, mirth. So an issue here is the broader idea of joy. Even though this might be translated here as pleasure, it's the broad idea of joy. Now, in this brief introduction, he summarizes his conclusion. He tips his hat and says, "But behold, this also is vanity." This is the word hebel, meaninglessness, something temporary, a number of different ways of translating it. But he says at the beginning here, either joy itself has a kind of maybe temporariness would be, or illusion would be the way of translating it here. Or he's saying that trying to find it, this testing, trying to find joy in life can have a kind of absurdness to it, meaningless to it. In other words, it's difficult to find. You have to work at it. And again, his question, what use is it? What use is it? That's a question of gain or profit. So you know, he's a very practical person, and he wants to know what am I going to get out of it? Is there a joy, a pleasure, and enjoyment that will lead to something good in my life? And we'll see this word good come up here in just a minute. By the end of the chapter, he does find a source of joy that comes from the hand of God and recommends that joy to us. But at the beginning, it seems a bit fruitless or hopeless as he launches into potential sources of joy. So one of the first things that he tests or explores or experiences is wine. I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So we saw last week in chapter 1, this phrase, or this use of the word heart. He wants us to know he's really serious about this. He's fully engaged in this exploration to find meaning and purpose and life, and all much more so with wine. So he engages his heart. This is heartfelt. He's all in terms of cheering his body with wine. There's some debate among the commentators as to how far he goes with wine, right? So my heart still guiding me with wisdom might lead us to think, well, he's very temperate. He's sipping wine. He's looking for the best quality of wine. But the phrase, and how to lay hold on folly might actually point us in the opposite direction. That he doesn't care about being temperate. Quality is great, but so is quantity. And he just wants to see how good can wine be? How much pleasure can wine bring? The goal of all of this is really summarized in the phrase, what was good? What was good? The Hebrew word in the white box down there at the bottom is tov. What is good? What is desirable in life? That's really the focus of the book of Ecclesiastes. He's searching for the good in life. So that might be a word that you take with you today. What is good? What is pleasant and desirable in life? And he's going to come back to that word again and again. Now, again, as in chapter 1, he notes that this testing, this exploration is taking place under heaven, so it's on earth, during a few days of our life. We'll see this come up again in chapter 2, but he has the brevity in life always in mind. For him, death is something that should be part of our daily framework, our daily thinking process. Which is interesting because we live in a culture that really tries to push as much as possible to push death away. Whether it's people who are dying or conversations about dying, we want to do everything we can to prolong life. And the last thing that we want to do when we come together is talk about the end of life. But for him, this shows up repeatedly as he's trying to figure out what's good. What is good will be defined in part by understanding that life is short. There is an end to life under the sun. And because of that, that's going to affect what we look at as good in life. Okay, so let's just talk about that in terms of what is the good, what is the pleasant, what is the desirable. When you think about that, what comes to your mind? What would you say this is good about life, or this is the good about life? Art?
I would say sharing,
Okay.
because it has an effect on more than just yourself.
Okay.
And so even if your life were to end, it would have been shared.
Yeah, good. Okay. Others, what is the good in life?
Harking back a little to my childhood, I suppose, but otherwise, I would use the phrase being rooted in the earth, which is a little different, I think, than just being in nature. It says more about me and the sense of connectedness to the earth. But I think for me, that is a deep and lasting good, a sense of being somehow rooted in and flowering, for a lack of a better word, growing, nurturing, thriving out of the earth.
I like that. Thank you. Scott?
I'm not gonna tell you what it is, but it happens when we are fully present and completely self-aware. So when those things happen together, then that's when the good happens.
Okay, so it's more, it's not a thing, but a way of
It's a
being.
state of mind.
State of mind. Julie?
I mean, this is not easy for church class, but I would say loving God.
Okay.
You know, so that's kind of obvious.
That's good, right?
You know, and then honestly, sharing that with others. Other people.
Why, thank you. Why do you think in this search for joy and the good, why does he start with wine? Sarah?
Well, I think that like the good of life we can experience without having to identify what it is that we're experiencing. That like I think the good in life is living in a way that is closest to what you were born to do, what God made you to do. And sometimes we know what that is, and sometimes we don't. And so when you're doing that thing, that's good. Like that's the good in life. And then I think that when we are able to identify the fact that we are living a life that we were born to live and doing God's will, that brings us joy. And so perhaps the wine makes it easier for us to see the things that we do that are good, that are compliant with God's intention for us.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I would, I think go along with that. I mean, I have hearing issues in this room, so I'm not always sure what I'm hearing, but I believe for a lot of us, wine is like the first level solution. It's the first thing you try to make yourself feel better. And it works. I mean, up to a point, it works. The reason it works is because it takes away the past, it takes away the future. You're more in the moment. It takes away the anxieties, it takes the edge off of everything. And it seems to be the solution. And it's where you can go quick to get that. I'm critiquing wine to a certain extent, but I myself appreciate it. So, you know, somewhere in there.
Right, so we might hold this in that tension
Yeah.
there, where we could obviously name some things that it doesn't do so well at the end, as well as acknowledging some things that.
Well, it can keep you from dealing with the other things.
Yeah. Sure.
I think, in short, what everybody's saying, wine is that to a certain degree, reasonable point, wine helps you not taking yourself too serious.
Right.
Okay. Sarah, and then.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. When my understanding of wine from this era is that it's more like water that's fermented in order to kill bacteria. And therefore, like, the alcohol level is not like what it is today. So wine then is very much different than wine today.
I mean, I think his language here, my heart still guarding with wisdom and how to label on folly, to me suggests that even if that's true, he's probably exploring enough of it, where he would be experiencing at least some of the things that we experience with contemporary wine, with modern wine. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it was more of a question than a statement, like, is what I understand why that true?
Yeah, I think a qualified yes would be an answer to that question. But certainly, some of the things that we experience with wine making and alcohol making today might be different than what they did in their day and time.
And even maybe the purpose. If the purpose was for hydration, so why was it almost necessary for them to drink? Because
but we think about the instance where Jesus is at the wedding in
right,
Cana, and there's a conversation about the best wine
right,
and the state that the guests of the wedding are in when the best wine comes out.
right,
Would seem to indicate, okay, well, these folks are pretty sauce,
right.
so why bring the good wine out?
Yeah.
John Rosemary had their hands up.
Well, I'm just throwing out a kind of question. Wine is the spoil of the great fruit. So what is this process? We start beautiful fruit, we then spoil or ferment, and then turn better. I don't know if that's where he's going with this.
That's an interesting connection there. Yeah, Scott.
I think you could substitute for wine anything in the context of plenty and good. And by that I mean, if they had wine, it means they had a season where they were able to grow grapes, and then they were able to harvest them and turn them into wine. That's in the context of plenty. That's a good thing. And you can almost substitute anything that is, for instance, bread. But as much as I love wine, I love really amazing bread. So I could, a really great loaf of bread, I could eat the whole thing in one sitting. Because it's just so good.
Yeah.
Well, I think anything that gives us that sense in the context of plenty of enjoyment could be substituted for wine.
Yeah. And where we're headed here in verse 24 to 26, he's going to come down and say, essentially eating, drinking, and labor or toil.
I wonder what happens for us when we substitute chocolate or cheesecake or, some other rich, delectable food that we're not so hung up on as we are alcoholic beverages. Because to some degree, I think it works in terms of the text. What is it that, I can do the same thing on chocolate, folks. Really.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. There are lots of different things we could fill in the blank with. Let's I want to make sure we get through the chapter. So let's move on here to verses 4 through 8. So he moves away from wine to other things. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delights of the sons of man. So it's a lengthy list of what comes under the umbrella of great works. The first part of verse 4, I made great works. Peter ends in his commentary says that in the ancient world, a list like this was fairly common when it came to kings. And it would be a list of what he translates as deeds of permanence. So these would be the kinds of things that a king might do to extend his legacy, to make his mark in the world, perhaps in a way that might even, sort of cheat death. He's still going to die, but these things live on beyond him, or at least the glory of them live on beyond him. So you go from something that's brief and temporary, like wine, and then we go to this long list of things that in the eyes of the king might have the potential to live on beyond him. And while he doesn't come out and say it right here, according to the introduction of the chapter, this too is vanity, or temporary, or absurd in some way. John.
It occurs to me, you can have all those things, but until you live your life in such a way that you recognize your connection to others, your connection to your maker, and as Sarah said earlier, your connection to your purpose, your calling, it's forgotten. But that's one of the beauties of wine. Often, wine, pasta, and bread. Pasta stuff. That it just opens up the connections that we have to the people that we're sharing this with. Try wine, pasta, and bread by yourself. It's not so good.
Yeah. And there is something very self-centered about this list here. It's an attempt to do what the world says, his world says a king can do to be remembered, to be thought of highly as a source of joy or pleasure. And in the end, he finds it wanting. Right? So lots of ways in which we can see parallels today. The things that we do, because that's what our world, religious world or wider world says you should do in order to be great, to be remembered, to make a mark. And yet in the end.
Can you start out by saying, I share great works?
Yeah. I'm really troubled by the fact that this is a list of possessions and riches. This is not a list of great deeds, as I understand that word. If he had written a great poem, if he had, cured a terrible illness or disease, these are not great works. These are a list of vast possessions and wealth. And it seems to me, maybe I'm just nitpicking over the words, but I really think the way we use words is terribly important. And this is a list of all that I own.
Sure, yeah.
One thing that he's done.
Sarah?
I mean, he is taking the credit for what the creator did. The creator has made gardens, and the creator has made trees, and the creator has made, all the things come from the creator, but he takes the credit himself by saying.
But I look at that first sentence. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. He didn't build houses for all these singers and slaves and concubines and so on and so on and so on. For myself, I made myself gardens and parks.
Right. Okay, we gotta move on. We get through the chapter. Very good comments. Verse 9. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. So this is the broad scope of the search. I kept my heart from no pleasure, and my heart found pleasure in all my toil, as this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, striving after the wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So he expands it. Okay, we've done wine, we've done these great works, and I denied myself no pleasure. but all was vanity. All was vanity. There was an illusion to it. There was a temporariness to it. It wasn't all that he had hoped that it would be. So in other words, it's sort of short-lived joy, right? Might have been joyful in the moment, but it didn't bring joy long term. Verse 12, I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw there is more gain in wisdom than folly, more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive the same event happens to all of them. And I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For the wise as a fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come, all will have been forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and is striving after the wind. So he says, well, sure, there are some advantages to some ways of living, like it's better to be wise than to be a fool. It's better to have some light than darkness. But then the vanity, the absurdness of life kicks in because, well, the same thing happens to both the wise person and the foolish person. They may experience similar bad things happening to them. And to him, that's part of the Hebel nature of life. You end up trying to live in the way that's really the best way to live, and you end up experiencing what the person over here experienced. And so he says, I hated life because what is done under the sun is grievous to me. Two more sections here. 18, I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will be a master of all for which I toil, and this also is vanity. So as he thinks about death, okay, death is going to cut this short. So that's another part of the observed nature of life is I'm going to put all this work into my life and I'm going to have to leave it to someone who I don't know what they're going to do with it. You know, they might use it foolishly, and they didn't have to work for it. And so you put all this labor into living and doing things that you think are going to bring you pleasure, you die, and it goes to somebody else. Somebody else gets the benefit of all that work. And again, for him, this is vanity and a great evil. Okay, so let's look at his conclusion here at the end of the chapter, verse 24. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and is striving after the wind. So we're going to see this come up several times throughout the book where he says there's nothing better. There's nothing better than this. So this is one of his first conclusions. There's nothing better than that a person should eat, drink, and find enjoyment. Now, some commentators look at that as sort of a sign of resignation. You mean that's it? There's nothing better than eating, drinking, and finding enjoyment in your labor? But another way to look at it, and I think maybe this is a better way to look at it, is to see, this is his conclusion of what the good is. One of the good things in life is simply to eat and to drink and to find enjoyment in your toil. Maybe what we would call the simple pleasures of life. Eating good food, drinking good drink, and finding some enjoyment in what God has given you to do. Like going back to this comment about finding your purpose in life, living out your purpose in life. But that's one of the good things that we have in life that can bring joy or pleasure in life. So I guess our time's up, and I'm sorry for that. I guess what I would encourage you to do is think about what are the simple pleasures that bring you joy, and look for those this week. what is your eating, drinking, and finding enjoyment in your toil? All right, thanks for all your comments. Good to see you guys online. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.